No work order. No contractor record. No ID badge. The officer stared at the old man with calm authority. You don't belong here, sir. But what he didn't know was that the man standing before him had once commanded that very base. A man who had led thousands into battle, and for the last 7 years, had quietly returned to serve without a single word. They thought he was a nobody with a mower. What they discovered was a 3-star general in work boots, still leading, even when no one was watching. Before we start, let us know where you're watching from. Love true stories of leadership? Subscribe now, another inspiring story drops tomorrow. Let's begin. Every morning at exactly 6 a.m., the folks around Camp Horizon saw the same figure, an elderly man in scuffed hiking boots, slowly pushing an ancient red Craftsman mower along the dew-covered path near the barracks. The machine rattled and coughed like it had no business still running, just like its owner, who moved with creaks of his own, but with undeniable purpose. He never wore a name tag, no uniform, just a plain tan shirt tucked into faded jeans, and a battered navy cap pulled low over his silver eyebrows. Most of the young recruits barely noticed him. Some figured he was just a local drifter doing odd jobs. Others guessed he was an old vet clinging to routines long since expired. A few thought he might be a bit senile, out of place in a world that had moved on. He asked for no pay, filed no paperwork, and kept to himself. Still, each morning, he cleared the edges no one else bothered with, righted crooked signs, and collected cigarette butts from cracks in the pavement. Routine keeps the mind sharp, he'd mutter when someone bothered to greet him. But few ever did. On a windless Wednesday morning, as the sun crept above the pine-lined ridge behind Camp Horizon, the old man, whose name no one seemed to know, paused by the flagpole. The cracked handle of his mower rested under his calloused palm as the bugle call began from the loudspeakers. At exactly 0800 hours, the national anthem played, echoing over the training grounds. Without hesitation, he stood at rigid attention. His spine straightened with remarkable grace, and his arms snapped up in a salute as sharp as any recruit's. For a moment, he wasn't a hunched silhouette in worn denim, he was a soldier again. Nearby, a cluster of recruits leaned against the mess hall railing, waiting for morning briefing. One, a cocky private named Dylan Jenkins, nudged his buddy and pointed. "Look at Grandpa over there. Thinks he's still running drills," he snickered. He snapped a photo, added the caption "Stolen Valor," and uploaded it to his social feed. The image quickly began circulating, shared, mocked, misjudged. That same evening, the photo found its way into military forums. Comments ranged from light-hearted jabs to genuine concern. A few questioned his presence on base, pointing out security risks and unauthorized access. Others, older voices, spoke with empathy. "Looks like one of us," someone wrote. "Maybe he never really left." The attention escalated. A complaint was formally filed to Camp Horizon's administration. "Unknown civilian accessing secured area without authorization," it read. "Potential breach of protocol." The base had tightened security over the years, no longer the kind of place you could just walk into, even if you'd once built the damn thing. Friday morning, the routine broke. As the old man trimmed the edge of the parade ground with meticulous care, 2 young MPs approached him. Their expressions were professional but wary. "Sir," one said, hand instinctively resting on his holstered sidearm, "we need to see your base access credentials." The man wiped sweat from his brow with a sun-bleached cloth and replied evenly, "Haven't used any in years. Walk through the south gate. Same time, every day." "That gate's supposed to be locked," the other MP noted. "Maybe someone forgot to check," the man said, neither defensive nor apologetic. They brought him to the security office. A lieutenant behind the desk reviewed the information available: no work order, no contractor record, no ID badge. "You don't belong here, sir," he said with measured patience. "You can't just show up and start mowing." The old man reached into his pocket and handed over a weathered document, an official Army retirement paper, dated 1988, signed with the name Franklin Reid. "I served here once," he said softly. "Just trying to keep it sharp." But no one in the room recognized the name. The officers he referenced had long since transferred or retired. Rules were rules. And just like that, he was escorted off base. His mower was tagged as abandoned equipment and confiscated. He didn't resist. He just nodded to the gate guards as he passed, like he always did. That weekend, the photo of Franklin Reid being escorted off Camp Horizon, mower gone, hands relaxed at his sides, went viral. It wasn't the kind of image that screamed scandal. It was quiet, dignified. But it stirred something. The photo had been taken by none other than Private Jenkins, the same soldier who had posted the mocking picture days earlier. This one had no caption. It didn't need one. The image found its way to veterans' pages and military alumni groups. Within hours, comments flooded in. "Who let this happen? He's not a threat. He's a reminder. Bet he's seen more than any of us ever will." But it wasn't until Sunday night that a single comment cut through the noise and changed everything. That comment came from a verified account belonging to Colonel Marcus Tillman, the current commanding officer of Camp Horizon. He had been away on a security conference at the Pentagon the past 2 weeks and had just caught up on the unfolding story. "That's Major General Franklin Reid," he wrote. "Former commander of the 4th Ranger Brigade. Decorated with the Distinguished Service Cross and 2 Silver Stars. I served under him in Kabul. This is an embarrassment." The thread exploded. Dozens of former officers, NCOs, and enlisted soldiers came forward, sharing photos, snippets of memory, fragments of history. Tales of a man who led from the front, who never raised his voice but always made himself heard. Who'd volunteered for every tough assignment, fought bureaucracy for his men, and never took credit for victories he considered shared. Suddenly, the old guy with the mower wasn't just a curiosity, he was a legend no one had recognized. By Monday morning, the entire base buzzed with speculation. Rumors swirled through ranks and offices. Some officers expressed regret. Others fumed at the breakdown in institutional memory. How could a man like that fade into anonymity? At exactly 8 o'clock hours, 3 Humvees rolled through the sleepy town outside Camp Horizon. They stopped at a modest brick house with a porch swing that creaked in the breeze. Colonel Tillman stepped out of the lead vehicle in full dress uniform. On the porch, Franklin Reid sat with his usual mug of black coffee. He looked up and smiled faintly. "Colonel Tillman," he said, rising. "I heard you were back." "Sir," Tillman said, halting at the foot of the steps. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" Reid took a sip of coffee, the lines on his face deepening with thought. "If they couldn't see it," he said quietly, "they weren't ready to follow it." That afternoon, Colonel Tillman called an emergency base assembly. A single chair stood empty at the head of the formation. At 1405 hours, a civilian van pulled up to the edge of the field, and out stepped General Reid, still in his boots, still in his quiet dignity. He didn't need his mower. His presence was enough. The heat shimmered above the parade ground as hundreds of soldiers stood at full attention, their boots aligned with mechanical precision. The buzz that had echoed across Camp Horizon all morning had faded into silence as a civilian van approached the review platform. The door opened, and out stepped a man few had acknowledged a week earlier. Major General Franklin Reid didn't wear ribbons or medals. His only uniform was his worn work boots, a faded blue button-up shirt, and the quiet dignity of a man who had led in silence for years. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He simply walked with the same deliberate pace he'd used each morning while mowing the perimeter. Colonel Marcus Tillman stood at the podium, his expression unreadable beneath mirrored aviators. When the murmurs died, he leaned into the microphone. "Attention to orders." The ranks stiffened instantly. "This man," Colonel Tillman continued, gesturing to Reid, "commanded troops in Panama, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He wrote portions of the very leadership doctrine we drill into your heads during officer training. He took this base, our base, from underfunded obscurity to the crown jewel of Southern Command. He did not retire into comfort. He returned quietly, with no fanfare, no demands, and began maintaining this place out of love and principle. Gasps rippled down the line. Private Dylan Jenkins, standing near the rear, stared at the man he'd once mocked. The same man whose photo he had uploaded with a flippant caption. His ears burned with shame. Colonel Tillman continued. Major General Reid served not just with excellence, but with humility. And when no one noticed him, he kept serving anyway. He stepped aside, saluted sharply, and with clear reverence, said, "Sir, permission to resume following your example?" Reid returned the salute, slow but firm. "Permission granted, Colonel." And with that, the mood shifted. The soldiers, many of whom had laughed or ignored the old man, now stood stiff and pale. For the first time, they truly saw him. Not as a groundskeeper, but as the kind of leader they were all trying to become. One by one, senior officers walked forward to salute Reid, each offering a brief apology or word of thanks. Then something unexpected happened. Private Jenkins broke ranks. Trembling slightly, he approached the platform and stopped exactly 3 paces from Reid. With his heart pounding in his ears, he raised his hand in a perfect salute. "Sir," he said, voice cracking, "I was wrong. I didn't know who you were. I'm sorry for what I said. And what I posted." Reid looked at him, no bitterness, no pride. Just a quiet resolve. "You said what you saw, Private. But next time, look harder." Then, he added something softer. "The uniform doesn't make the soldier. The soldier makes the uniform." That moment, more than the speech, more than the ceremony, shifted something deep in the soul of Camp Horizon. Respect wasn't just restored. It was reborn. By the end of that week, the story of Major General Franklin Reid had traveled far beyond the dusty parade grounds of Camp Horizon. Military publications reached out for statements. Veteran groups shared stories. Even a few national news outlets picked up the tale of the old general with the mower. But Reid, as always, declined interviews. He wasn't interested in attention. He'd already done what he came to do. Inside Camp Horizon, everything changed. Colonel Tillman wasted no time turning reflection into action. He gathered his senior staff and made a decision that would alter the base's orientation program permanently. Every new recruit would now be required to read Major General Reid's full service record, not just as a history lesson, but as a leadership case study. His decades of decorated service, his battlefield strategies, his innovations in troop wellness, and above all, his quiet post-retirement return to duty would become the foundation of a revised leadership module, Service Beyond the Stars. But that wasn't all. The South Gate, once an overlooked side entrance, was repurposed and renamed. A small bronze plaque was installed with the inscription, "In honor of Major General Franklin Reid, who never stopped watching over us." Next to it stood a newly constructed pedestal. On it sat his old, rattling red mower. Restored, polished, preserved. What was once an object of ridicule had become a symbol of purpose. The transformation extended beyond ceremony. Colonel Tillman reassigned the soldiers who had mocked or ignored Reid to lawn duty, not as punishment, but as understanding. In rotating squads, they trimmed hedges, painted curbs, picked up trash, and swept sidewalks, tasks Reid had performed without complaint, recognition, or compensation for years. One afternoon, Sergeant Molina, their supervising NCO, gathered them near the edge of the barracks lawn. "Anyone can polish boots before inspection," he said. But the general didn't care who was watching. He cared that it got done. He pointed at the freshly mowed field. "Appearance is for rank. Standards are for legacy. You're not just maintaining grounds. You're preserving integrity." Recruits nodded solemnly. Some wiped sweat from their foreheads. No one complained. Meanwhile, Reid stayed home. He didn't need to return. He'd already passed the baton. But every morning at 0600, his coffee brewed the same, and he glanced toward the ridge overlooking Camp Horizon. He never said it aloud, but in his heart, he knew the mission was no longer his alone. Leadership had taken root again, not in medals or orders, but in grass, in gravel, in quiet work done right. And the base he once commanded was now a living tribute to the values he held most dear: humility, service, and showing up when no one else will. The opportunity wasn't in the ceremony. It was in the shift. In the faces of young soldiers learning that greatness often wears dust, not stripes. The change wasn't just visible in new routines or commemorative plaques, it was felt in the hearts of those who had stood under the hot Texas sun that afternoon and realized they'd mistaken humility for irrelevance. Among those most affected was Private Dylan Jenkins. Once the face behind a mocking photo, Jenkins had become obsessed, not out of guilt, but out of something deeper. Respect. He checked out every document available on Major General Franklin Reid from the base archives. Old field reports. Tactical breakdowns. Personnel evaluations. What struck him wasn't just the commendations or battlefield victories, but the quiet consistency of the man. Reid's evaluations were full of the same line, repeated by different superiors: leads from the front. Never asks for credit. Never leaves a man behind. One night, Jenkins requested a meeting with Colonel Tillman and asked permission to interview General Reid for the Camp Horizon internal newsletter. Tillman raised an eyebrow, then nodded. "Make it honest," he said. "And don't sugarcoat what got you here." The interview was held on Reid's porch, where the general sat with his mug of black coffee and an old Labrador named Max sleeping nearby. Jenkins brought a notebook full of questions, but found himself asking just one. "Why did you never correct us?" Reid looked at the young man for a long moment, then replied in his usual low, even tone. "Respect based on rank is protocol. Respect based on action, that's leadership. I needed to know which one this place still valued." The article that followed was raw, humble, and profoundly human. Titled "The Man with the Mower," it became mandatory reading for all personnel. Not for the sake of tradition, but transformation. Reid's influence didn't stop with Jenkins. Sergeant Molina, who'd once rolled his eyes at the sight of the elderly man picking up trash, now ended every week with a moment of silent reflection by the mower pedestal. "Some of you will lead battalions," he told his squad one morning. "But if you can't lead yourself to pick up a gum wrapper without being told, you're not ready." Even officers who had never met Reid in uniform began reshaping how they interacted with enlisted troops. There was less shouting. More mentorship. Quiet leadership started replacing loud authority. And morale, real, lasting morale, began to grow like the grass the general once tended. As for Reid, he remained largely unchanged. He still woke before dawn. Still brewed his coffee the same way. Still walked his dog along the path behind the church where you could almost glimpse the edge of Camp Horizon. He never asked for the transformation. But in quietly showing up, he caused it. The greatest leaders don't always march ahead, they walk beside us, unnoticed, until we realize we've followed them all along. Veterans Day arrived with a crisp breeze rolling in over the ridgelines, carrying with it a rare stillness that settled over Camp Horizon like a reverent hush. Soldiers in full dress uniform lined the main parade ground. Families, community leaders, and retired service members filled the temporary bleachers, all eyes fixed on the central platform. At precisely 0900 hours, Colonel Marcus Tillman took the stage and adjusted the microphone. His voice, usually confident and crisp, now carried a more deliberate tone. "Today, we honor service. But not just service in battle, or service in uniform, but the kind of service that continues when no one's watching." Then he turned slightly and extended a hand toward the steps of the platform. "Please welcome our guest of honor, Major General Franklin Reid." A murmur swept through the crowd as the man many had once overlooked emerged, not with fanfare, but with that familiar, quiet composure. His boots, while freshly polished, still bore the scars of decades. His hands were as worn as ever. No medals adorned his chest. Just a plain navy blazer over a collared shirt, and the unmistakable air of someone who had lived for others. He approached the microphone slowly, scanned the sea of faces, and cleared his throat. His speech would be remembered not for its length, but for its power. The best commanders lead when no one's watching. Then he stepped back. A long silence followed, before the crowd, almost as one, rose to their feet. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but sustained. Some saluted. Others wiped their eyes. Many just stood in humbled recognition of a man who had redefined leadership not through orders, but through presence. That evening, a new tradition quietly began. At the south gate of Camp Horizon, now officially designated Reid Gate, the youngest active duty soldier each day would walk up to the pedestal, stand at attention before the plaque, and salute. No audience. No announcements. Just 5 words, whispered into the wind. I never left my post. These words, once spoken by Reid when asked why he kept mowing the grounds long after retirement, had become something larger, a mantra. A reminder that service does not expire. That rank means little if it isn't matched by action. That the greatest honors are often earned in silence. Across the Army, Reid's story began appearing in leadership academies, mentoring programs, and orientation materials. The man with the mower became a case study in humility, vigilance, and character. Other bases started their own quiet ceremonies, inspired not by regulation, but by example. As for Reid, he remained in his modest home on the outskirts of town. He didn't seek interviews. He didn't accept awards. But every so often, he'd walk Max along the tree line near Camp Horizon. And sometimes, without meaning to, young soldiers would spot him from afar. They wouldn't wave. They wouldn't run over. They'd simply stop what they were doing. And stand a little taller. Major General Franklin Reid never needed recognition to lead. He never chased applause, status, or acknowledgement. Instead, he lived a principle that transcends military life. True leadership isn't about visibility. It's about responsibility. The quiet acts, showing up early, doing what others overlook, and maintaining standards when no one's watching, are what define legacy. Reid's story reminds us that humility isn't weakness, it's strength wrapped in silence. His legacy wasn't built in the war room or on parade grounds, it was built with every step he took along the Barracks road, every piece of trash he picked up, every moment he chose service over self. And most importantly, he never told people to follow him. He just led. Until they chose to. If stories like this move you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from?